حبر الأمة وبحرها رضوان الله عليهم. Ibn Abbas says this, and this hadith is long, so let me just take you through it. Someone who has love, the first station. He's trying to reach the final, the third station. But how is that? Love will make him relentless in trying to reach the final destination. Let's see. Ibn Abbas says, حدثني من فيه. Yani he told me. Young man. Hadith is long, so if I say it in Arabic entirely, it might take us too long. But let me try to go through some abbreviation, main milestones in the hadith. He says, Kuntu shabban, I was a young man. This is a young man in Persia, Ibn Abbas is saying, telling us the story of this young man. Min qaryatin yuqalu laha Ji aw Jay. From a village called Ji around Isfahan. In Arabic we call it, hadith says Asbahan. Lakin it is called Isfahan in English, I think. They say Isfahan, Nisfa Jahan, or something in the old days. There's no more Nisfa Jahan. But now Google is all Kulla Jahan, that's it. There's anyway. This young man was Isfahan, or a village there. His father min dahaqina, he says, my father was from the chief people who were in charge of the fire worshipping temple. And he used to fear on me a lot. So he enforced an embargo that I should not leave the temple ever. And I grew up knowing about the temple and its rituals until I became the one in charge of making sure the fire that they were worshipping is not put off, is always lit. But the love of Allah in this young man, قُلْ إِن كُنْتُمْ تُحِبُّونَ اللَّهَ فَاتَّبِعُونِ. He needs to search. His thirst is not getting quenched. He says, until one day, my father has a business in so-and-so daya, in a village a bit far away from where we lived. And he got occupied, he couldn't go, so he had to send me instead. So he told me, go to that village and come back before sunset, because he's afraid about him. He says, I went. It was my chance. Young man, he wants to go explore. And his father, he's so scared for him, he doesn't want him to leave the house. He says, I went, and on the way, I stopped. I heard voices coming from a worship place. And chants and things. I came in, it's a church for people who were Christians. He says, I entered. And I remained with them. I liked it. And I spent the whole day, I forgot about myself until the time already has passed and it's already night. I went back to my father fearful. I arrived there, what happened to you? He says, I didn't even continue to the village where you asked me to go, because on the way I found, the hadith sahih, huh? I'm not telling you, I don't tell you stories. I'm not here to tell you stories. Until I found these people, Christians, Nasara, and they're worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a church, and I loved what they're doing. He says, Dinuka wa dinu abaik khair. Your deen and the deen of your father is just better than their deen. He says, I told him, La wallah, oh father, by Allah, no. I found those people praying to Allah and glorifying Him, and we're worshipping fire. He says, you don't leave this temple anymore, huh? Khalas, that's it. He said, I sent a written letter, to these Christians. I told them, who is the Where did you get your deen from? Who was the center in the world who knows your deen? I want to learn. He wants to search for Allah. It seemed like those people at that church did not give him all the answers. They gave him enough. But he was looking. They told him, you have to go to Sham, yani the land of the Levant. For Sham. He says, okay. He sent him a letter. Said, when you have a caravan going to Sham, send me a message. I will come and travel with you from Persia all the way to Sham. Soon enough, after some time, a caravan of Christians came from Sham to Persia to these people's church, and they sent a quick message to this young man who was in the temple of fire worshipping, said, the caravan is here, they're ready to depart, hurry up. He says, I freed myself from the temple and I went all the way to the church and I joined their caravan in that travel, long travel to Sham. He said, he got to Sham. He says, take me to the chief monk, the most knowledgeable scholar in Christianity. He says, they took him to that big church. He says, this is the man. So this young man came to him and says, would you allow me to come and serve you and learn from you and accompany you? He says, yes. He says, he allowed me, so I served him and I served the church and I was there and I lived with him. He lived with him for years until he died, that monk. This young man, obviously now after how long? I don't know, maybe 10, 20 years after that man. He maybe is no longer a young man. But he says, وَكَانَ رَجُلَ سُوءٍ. This monk was a bad man. This head of the church, he says, was a bad man. He would call people to be good and he would be bad. He would call people to give charity and he would take that charity and hide it and save it for himself. So when he died, he says, when he died, all the followers there in the land of the Levant, for Sham, they gathered and they're doing the memorial service and they buried him. They asked him, you young man, well, no longer maybe young man, you lived with him and you served him close up. Tell us about him. He says, do you want me to tell you the truth? They said, yes. He says, he was a bad man. This is our man? You know, he was a bad man. How? Where's the dalil? Where's the evidence? He says, the money that you gave, he is saving it all in barrels in the bottom of the church. Show us, let's see. He says, فَأَخْرَجْتُ لَهُمْ سَبْعَ قِلَالٍ مِّن ذَهَبٍ وَوَرِقٍ. I led them to 7 big jars, ذهب, gold, and wariq, fidda, silver. He says when they saw this, they went, they dug him out, and they crucified him after death. Okay, you don't crucify him. The man is dead. They crucify him and they start throwing stones at him after he died. He says, in his place, then they appointed a man, another man. And he allowed me to be his servant and serve him. He says, and I lived with this man. He lived with this man for a long time, the new head monk. He says, and this man was the most pious of people I've ever seen. I have not seen anyone like him, fearing Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, day and night. He says, I served him and learned from him all his life.